I want to welcome you to the keynote event of the Literature of Hope, Popular Romance Fiction. I want to speak with real dispatch because I know how excited we all are about this headlining event. But first, we need to do some pretty imperative gratitude work. My name is Katie Lofton, and I teach American Studies and Religious Studies here at Yale, where I also serve as the Dean of Humanities. It is in this capacity that I observe that this event is the most soul-salving conference I've had the honor to attend at this university. Sarah McLean said at this morning's panel, I'm already crying. At this morning's panel, that what romance readers want is to talk to other romance readers about how much they love romance. And although she and many other leaders of romance have made these spaces abundantly possible, universities like these have not known what to make of this genre. It's a genre that we know saves lives, as it did my own when I clutched many a warm paperback in a house of violence, learning from those pages that there was better love to expect than what I had. It's a genre that we know anticipates and formats cultural change. It's a genre that isn't just a genre of fiction, but also nonfiction, self-help for the lovers, teaching us that we have the right to feel the best things there are in life to feel. Yet still, the masculinist legacies of nerd power have made it so such rooms have been hard to conjure here. But not anymore. The feminist collective that drew this event together represents the best scholarly present and future. They do this not only in their remarkable scholarship and teaching, but also in how they collaborate with mutual care, respect, and common tenacity. So I want to take a moment to thank each of the organizers, calling them down here for, yes, a moment of recognition. As they come, we're going to hand them a gift of a rose bouquet, and yes, a bridal party gift of a heart necklace. As they come, we're going to hand them the gift of a rose bouquet because you brilliant queens deserve garland and commemoration for the power you brought to all of us. Today, yesterday, and I believe forevermore in these sorts of halls and beyond. So I want to begin. Oh, I got to do the flap. This is a little more than my Okay. I want to begin with, my beloved colleague, the faculty advisor for this project, Erica Edwards. Erica. No, it's okay. Thank you. Yeah, please do. Erica is a professor of African American Studies and English whose arrival on this campus was a shot of spiritual and intellectual adrenaline and who models in her person a new possibility for what the university can be. Next, I want to salute Aman Abdul Karim. Aman is a PhD candidate in African American Studies and Religious Studies whose gift for graphics and media, self-making and world-making. She designed the logo, built the website, led publicity, nearly a match for her abilities as a cultural critic and a student of Islamic studies. Aman. Next, I want to bring down Lacey Jones. Lacey is a PhD candidate in English and Religious Studies who brought her gifts for language and the administration of an event that required a lot of extremely well-crafted emails to achieve. Like spinning straw into gold, Lacey uses words to solve problems. Next, let me welcome the great Rebecca Potts. Rebecca is a PhD candidate in Religious Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies, as well as the project manager for this event, who served as the Swiss Army knife of the operation. If the tech worked and you feel really physically good right now, please thank Rebecca. If not, yes, blame Yale. Next to last, I invite Lisa Byler Yavara. Lisa is a PhD candidate in architecture and religious studies who is a true organizational genius. Her ability to put concept into action on the page and in life is rather uncomparable. She is, with initiative and a lot of system savvy, Lisa made the vision for this event into the reality that we all got to sink into. Please holler for Lisa one more time. Right. Last but not least, the opposite of least, I want to bring Jeannie Marie Moore. This is the most pleasing view. I'm so pleased right now. Jeannie Marie is a PhD candidate in African American Studies and Religious Studies. She is the person whose leadership includes constantly asking not to be seen as the lead. Someone who specifically told me to describe the group as an equitable collective and told me that they should be understood as commonly coordinated. There is no singular leader. Yes, the latter is, of course, true. But as each of these leaders has said many times, this was Jeannie Marie Moore's brainchild, the result of her expertise in African American religion, literature, and theology, and a lifetime spent thinking through romance as a world and life-building genre. So we want to pause now and thank the person who made all this loving work about love work so lovingly well. Jeannie Marie, thank you. We have to keep Jeannie Marie up here because, of course, she's doing everything. So we're now going to take a pause for a brief moment with the New Haven Free Public Library. So I'm going to begin by calling down Maria Bernhardt and Diane Brown. Please come down. And as they come down, please, yes, let's pause. Thank them. Yes. So as they come down, I only keep talking because I'm so excited for the event, but I please come down. I'm going to read briefly their bios and then Jeannie Marie, and they are going to speak briefly to us. Maria is the newly appointed city librarian and director of the New Haven Free Public Library. She began working at the library in 2022 as a public services administrator overseeing the strategic advancement of neighborhood branches and the Young Minds and Family Learning Department. Diane Brown, a native of New Haven, is an internationally decorated librarian that continues to receive awards for her innovation, dedication, and compassion for libraries. Beginning in 2015, she played a lead role in every aspect of the construction of the new Stetson Branch Library that opened in March 2022. Under her leadership, a collection of over 18,000 multimedia items were selected for the new branch. Additionally, she single-handedly curated a new African diaspora collection, formerly the African American collection, to include the works of Black culture around the world, making it one of a kind in Connecticut and beyond. Please, again, let's thank them all.
So Maria and Diane, please come up. Today's event, this weekend's event, was definitely a community effort, and to that end, we would like to offer the New Haven Free Public Library a moment to acknowledge our honored guests. And so Maria and Diane, take it away.
Hello, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the New Haven Free Public Library, we are honored to be here today in such literary greatness. Libraries thrive and are cultural hubs and amazing institutions that draw communities in, but they would not be what they are without amazing writers and their books that line our shelves. It's because of that people find their identities. Because of that, people explore, discover, and are able to find their place not only in libraries but also in literature. And it's because of that it also inspires future writers of tomorrow. So because of that, we did want to just acknowledge your outstanding contributions to literature, and we wanted to award you with these New Haven Free Public Library literature certificates. So Beverly Beverly Jenkins and Roxane Gay.
Thank you.
Please rise for a picture.
New librarian and new assistant.
Here we go. Look right here.
And I have the honor of presenting this library citation to someone who our families grew up together in New Haven. My big sister and her little sister were best of friends. Karen, it's so good to see you again. And I have something for you.
Yeah, my first library card came from the Stetson branch.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Erica Edwards, and I had the great honor of serving as one of the conference organizers, which means that I've just really had the pleasure of watching this gathering grow from an idea to its fruition, thanks to the dedication and real passion of some badass graduate students. I also want to thank Dean Katie Lofton for everything you do, especially for your support for this event, just for showing us how to do gratitude. I just want to say that all of you, especially the organizers, have taught me so much, not only about popular romance fiction, but also about building meaningful community around women's and especially Black women's intellectual and creative work. So deep, deep gratitude. And now we've come to our happy ending. It's my great honor to introduce you to the three towering participants in this evening's keynote conversation. I want to invite you to read the keynote speakers' complete bios in the conference program, and I'm going to be as quick as I can to leave as much time as possible for their own words. Roxane Gay is our leading feminist critic, an expert in feminism and form. In her nonfiction, ranging from her collection Bad Feminist, named one of NPR's best books of the year, to her best-selling memoir Hunger, to her anthology Not That Bad, Dispatches from Rape Culture, Gay asks us to grapple with the violences of misogyny and misogynoir, and to imagine a feminism robust enough to take a multiplicity of bodies across the differences of race, gender, ability, and size into account. A gifted creative writer who we have to thank for the beautiful short story collection Difficult Women, and the Amazon single short story Graceful Burdens, and the graphic novel The Sacrifice of Darkness, Gay began her own publishing imprint with Grove Atlantic, Roxane Gay Books. She's now at work on books about writing and voice, and a YA novel, and a romance novel, co-authored. That is co-authored with the actor Channing Tatum. Roxane Gay was a presidential visiting fellow here at Yale 5 years ago, so it's a real pleasure to welcome you back in this context. Welcome back to New Haven. Beverly Jenkins, Miss Bev, is a prolific author of historical romance fiction and the premier author of Black historical romance fiction in the world. Since the publication of Night Song in 1994, she has been a leading figure for inclusive romance. She's the author of more than 50 works of fiction. And the recipient of the 2018 Michigan Author Award by the Michigan Library Association the 2017 RWA Nora Roberts Lifetime Achievement Award, and the 2016 Romantic Times Reviewer's Choice Award for Historical Romance. She was also nominated for the NAACP Image Award in Literature. Her most recent series, Blessings, revolves around the all-Black town of Henry Adams, Kansas. It begins when one of the last surviving townships founded by formerly enslaved people after the Civil War puts itself up for sale on the internet. And a wealthy, middle-aged Black woman, fresh off a divorce, Bernadine Brown, buys the town with money from the divorce settlement. The most recent book in that series, A Christmas to Remember, gives us Bernadine deep in wedding preparations. Throughout her work, Ms. Bev approaches Black histories through the compelling powers of the romance genre. We are very honored to have had her here for these 2 days and especially for this evening's conversation. Welcome. This evening's conversation will be moderated by Karen Grigsby Bates. She is a founding member of Code Switch, NPR's award-winning podcast that reports on race, ethnicity, and culture. A veteran NPR reporter, Bates covered race for the network for several years before joining Code Switch. She is an expert on books by and about people of color and on race and diversity in the publishing industry. She's often asked to speak on book panels, such as at the National Book Festival and the Los Angeles Times Festival of Books. And she's also interviewed scores of authors, from Nobel Prize winner Kazuo Ishiguro and National Book Award winner James McBride to our own Beverly Jenkins. Bates is the co-author of a best-selling etiquette book, Basic Black, Home Training for Modern Times, and 2 mystery novels. She's also written essays for several anthologies. She's currently working on a novel about Black students on a New England campus in the 1970s. And it is now that I give you to Karen Grigsby Bates and this wonderful keynote panel.
Thank you, Professor Edwards. And thank you all for being here. I know it's been a long day and a long weekend, but I've gotten such joy from it. I hope you have too, because the vibe, as you young people say, was incredible. There was incredible joy from the beginning when Ms. Bev spoke at Marquand on Friday, followed by an absolutely slamming sermon by Reverend Genia Ray. I hope that's recorded, and I hope that you have a chance to listen to it, because it really is completely uplifting and totally delightful. Anyway, enough of my thoughts about this. I want to hear about y'all's thoughts about this, and we are going to talk to the entire theme of the conference, which is popular romantic fiction, a prescription for hope, maybe. I want to ask each of you how you became aware that romance novels even existed. You know, we've heard stories from people who say they've sneaked them off their relatives', bookshelves, or they became aware of them because one fell on them in the library, and it's like, ooh, what's this? How did each of you discover that there was such a thing as a romance novel? And how old were you? I know Ms. Bev has a story.
I discovered them at the Mark Twain Library in Detroit on the corner of Burns and Gratiot, and I had to be maybe 10. There was a small YA section, and there was a Beanie Malone. I don't know if anybody's here old enough to remember that, but it was about a white teenager and her going through high school stuff and all of that, and she had a crush, and it was interesting. I mean, I read everything even then, but that's an odd kind of but a good question. And then 17th Summer. And then I discovered Mary Stewart. And it sort of took off from there. By then I was, 16, 17? So that's sort of my gateway drug.
How about you, Roxane?
I read a lot when I was growing up, and my parents didn't care what I was reading as long as it was in a book. They did not monitor my reading, which is a choice. And so I started, I think the first, it's not technically a romance, but it kind of is, was Clan of the Cave Bear.
Oh, yeah.
By Jean Auel. And I learned a lot from that book and what happens on fur. And I just love the epic nature of it and the love story, and it's basically prehistorical fiction. And so I was like, ooh, I could go live in a cave. And then one of the magazines my parents subscribed to had this Harlequin thing on the back, and you could send in $10 and they would send you 5 or more books. I can't even remember how many. And so I would get my little coins together and order and get these boxes of books, and of course read through them in 3 days. And so that was my real first exposure to romance.
I spent some time with Octavia Butler years ago, and she told me that she decided to become a writer when she was about 9 years old because she was staying up late at night and watching television, and there were only about 3 or 4 channels back then. And so on the late movie, there was something called Devil Girl from Mars, and she watched it and looked, and she said, and after that, I just looked and said, I could write that. That's ridiculous. And so she did. And that's what made her, that began her path. What, for each of you, when did you decide that you were going to become writers? And I mean, you, Bev, writers of romance. Roxane, your first book was not a romance, but it was, you had to make a conscious decision that you were going to do a book as opposed to papers or a thesis or something else. When did you decide that?
I don't know. I don't think I decided it. I just always wrote. Mm-hmm. I've been writing since I was 4 years old. And of course, I wrote age, what you would expect from a 4-year-old. I was not a prodigy. But
Every
I just
child's a
always
prodigy.
loved writing, and through junior high and high school, and I actually went to Yale for undergrad. And so all through that time, I would write obsessively almost. And in many ways, it was self-medication to deal with some pretty horrific things. Mm-hmm. And as a librarian, she gave me a copy one day of the, oh my God, I'm blanking on it, but it's a book where you could find out the addresses of all the magazines in the country. And it used to be ubiquitous, and now all of that has moved online, but it came out every year. And so I was like, well, I feel like maybe I could get published. And so I would literally send my sad little stories to the Paris Review and always have this weird belief that they were going to publish my shit. I mean, wow, to be young. And so I just kept being very persistent and living in the middle of nowhere oftentimes. So I had lots and lots of time to write. And as I got older, more and more people started thinking I might have something worthwhile to say.
Like Roxane, I wrote, for me, little poems and chapters of Star Trek. I guess it was fanfic. Before the word fanfic. But I never wanted to be a writer. All I ever wanted to do was work in a library. That was it. But I sort of...
Changed your mind.
Well, I was working in a library. And one of the founding big pharmas, Park Davis, And one of my colleagues, and I've told this story, y'all have heard this a million times. One of my colleagues had just gotten published by a sweet romance publisher in Michigan, a small publisher. And I told her I was working on this romance. This was BC, before children, right? And she wanted to see it. And I brought it in, and she said, well, you need to get this published. And, you know, back then, this is early 80s. Back then, mass market was closed to us, you know, for most part. And there definitely was, you know, black romance you could count on maybe, you know, 3 fingers. So I tell people that she harassed me every day. When are you going to find an agent? So to shut her up, and I cannot tell you today how I found Vivian Stevens, but Vivian was my first agent, and I was working at the reference desk at Park Davis at the time. And so I sent in this little raggedy manuscript, and she called me less than a week later and said she wanted to represent me. So I sort of fell into this as opposed to seeking writing.
This is not the same question, but it sounds like the same question. I want to know, who's your audience and for whom do you write? And I'm asking that because, you know, doing Code Switch at NPR, we always said, well, we're doing this to diversify NPR's audience and to reach out to people who are younger and browner and blah, 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 blah. Well, by the time we got the statistics back, you know, audience research, we were doing what we were doing, and the audience was about 75% white because it's public radio. And, you know, that has started to change, but for a long time, it is what it is. And so you may be writing to a certain group of people or to a certain demographic, but your readers may be somebody else entirely. And I'm wondering if there's a discrepancy there.
Yes.
All right, tell me about it.
Definitely a discrepancy. I would say that I'm writing to Black women, and to Black women in particular, I think from the Midwest, from places, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska.
I've been there.
Oh, see?
I have.
Once in a while, you never know. So, you know, I think Black women who have always found themselves on the margins, wanting to feel like they are the center. And in my work, I believe that I do my best to center us and recognize that Blackness contains a multitude of versions. Mm-hmm. And I try to also create space for that. My audience is earnest white women. And
public radio listeners.
Yes, 100%. And also, I would say young white women who are ambitious and who have been told their entire lives that they're incredible, and then they encounter the real world that is not so interested in how incredible they are. And so it took a while for me to not make peace, because readers are readers and I'm grateful for all of them, but oftentimes the people you think you're writing to and the people who actually receive your message are two different things. And I think a lot of that is because publishing in general does not know how to market to Black audiences. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm fortunately at a place in my career where I say, what's your plan for Black readership? And what Black publicists are you bringing on to help you address this problem? Mm-hmm. And what Black booksellers are in these towns that I'm going to? Like, I'm going to Detroit for I have a book coming out in October, and I'm going to Detroit, and Source Books has been incredible to me over the course of my career. So I made sure that we're going to Source Books, and it's Black woman owned. And so you just have to, when you get to a place where you have to be able to, even though we shouldn't have to, but help your publisher get to where they need to be, because they just don't know shit about shit. They don't. And publishing is run by white women, which is why most readers are white women. Or most acknowledged readers, I should say.
You know, I grew up in the 50s, right? And Toni Morrison said that if there's something that you want to read that hasn't been written, then you need to write it yourself. As much as I love love stories and everything else, there was no representation for me on the page. So I was working before I started working for Big Pharma, I was working at Michigan State University's graduate library. And I was coming home and writing a love story just for me. I had no plans to get it published. But my audience, after Night Song was published in 1994, was black women. Because they hadn't seen themselves on the page either. I remember stories of women telling me that when they saw that book in Barnes & Noble or Walden or B. Dalton, all of these stores that are no longer, functioning or open. One woman said the first thing she did was flip to the back to make sure it was written by a black woman.
Was your picture on the
yeah,
other
my
credit?
picture, my glamour shot. And she said when she found out about that it was written by a black woman, she said she immediately sat down on the floor in the bookstore and started to read. They were hungry for this stuff. So basically I was writing for me, but I was also writing for other women who weren't seen on the page, they weren't seen on the screen, they weren't heard on the radio. I grew up in Motown, so there's lots of black music. Mm-hmm. But representation on the screen, on the page matters. And I represented me and on the side, the rest of black women. So
before you get to representing people, you have to actually write. And I want to know something about process, because everybody has a different one. And we're especially curious about you two because you do a bunch of stuff. You're juggling a bunch of things. You have a bunch of jobs. And, what you hear may or may not be true. You always hear, write what you know or who you know. And you also hear, you have to write every day or there's no point to it. You have to write every day. So are either of those true? Have they been true for y'all?
I mean, the thing about writing advice is that most of it's terrible. And it's very individual. It's like, here's what works for me. And then a lot of writers take it upon themselves to assume that it can become universal. And it's really best practices. I have a book of writing advice coming out maybe next year, maybe in 2025. And the first line is, all writing advice is terrible, because it is. And when I was in high school, my teacher told me, Mr. McGuinn told me to write every day. And I thought he was giving me a precious piece of wisdom. And so I took it to heart, and I do write every day. Mm-hmm. But you absolutely don't need to write every day. You don't need to write every week or even every month. Some people don't. But for me, even if I'm not writing something useful every day, I am writing every day. And I think for me and for many others, writing is a muscle, and it needs to be exercised, and it needs to grow and be trained. And so I also read every day. I read quite a lot. And I read cross genres because I think that it's important to just be part of the literary world. And of course, we all have our comfort reading. And when I'm feeling some kind of way, I have my comfort reading. But when I'm just reading for pleasure and I don't need that specific itch scratched, I'll read whatever. And other than that, I don't have a formal writing process because my life is chaotic right now. And I'm blessed to have the life that I do. But many years ago, I think it was Margaret Atwood told me, the more successful you get, the harder it is to find time to write. And she was absolutely correct. Like, it's so hard to write on tour. You always think, I'm going to write on the plane. And then you get on the plane and you're fucking tired. And there's a very terrible movie available. And so you just watch this very dumb movie, which is what I did yesterday on the 6-hour flight here, with my dog staring at me so angrily. He hates being in his little room. He's so mad at me right now. I know. I almost brought him, but I couldn't take his anger. So he's with my wife, and he's not mad at her. But yeah, so I just write when I can, how I can, and then when I like pass a deadline and an editor gets very angry, then I knuckle down.
I think, as she said, it's an individual kind of thing, and what works for some writers may not work for you as a writer. I think one of the universal things is don't ever turn in your first draft. First draft's always crap. And you can't write. I mean, there are some people who have the luxury of writing every day. I don't, because I'm lazy. There are days I want to plant tulips. There, and being a procrastinator, I mean, that's my middle name. Why write when I can put it off till tomorrow? But the deadline, once the deadline gets above my titties, then I got to start writing. And
It needs to be on a
and
t-shirt.
my poor editor.
How many people would buy that
I am never
t-shirt?
going to forget that. And from now on,
Well,
How can you explain to your editor?
I have a
it's not
girlfriend who
there yet?
passed recently.
well, no, the next time my editor asks me, I'm going to be like, it's above my titties right now.
I have a girlfriend, and sometimes I would ask her, and she's a journalist and all of this, and got a lot going on. And I said, well, how are you doing? She said, girl, I got my titties up in alligators. Alligators up into my titties. So that's that thing with her is the whole titty thing, right? Up to my titties and alligators. That's the phrase. So, y'all know y'all can't take me nowhere. Okay, back to being serious here. But you write as you can. Some people, like I said, have the luxury, if you want to call it that, of writing, their whole project every day. Some of us write different stuff every day. Some of us got sick kids. Mm-hmm. Some of us are taking care of our parents. Some of us are, got a big project at the job that pays the mortgage, which doesn't let us write what we want to write every day. So when you see, the shit on the internet, Beyonce's internet, that demands that you write every day. Usually this is somebody who maybe not be a single mom.
Yeah.
Or Thoreau. You have this whole thing with Thoreau, right? His mama was bringing him food. His mama was washing his clothes while he was out, in the wilderness. And then they find out that the land was owned by black people who starved to death. So there's always a different side to the story. So you do what you can with what you can to make it do what it do. Okay, that's my long, circuitous.
And yet it made so much sense.
You all are both published writers many, many times over. So you've had your experience with the industry. I want to know, what did they tell you in publishing that you found out as you went along was just not true, or that you decided, yeah, this didn't work for me? Zip.
Well, I mean, I think that there is a lot of lore around publishing, and I think it comes from people feeling like it's this inscrutable, impermeable world. But when I entered publishing, I was living in rural Michigan, in Houghton, Hancock, Michigan, which is in the UP, 10 hours north of Detroit. So when I say I had no connection to the city, I had absolutely no connection to the city. And I learned how to find an agent by Googling, how do I find an agent? And then following those instructions. And it worked. And so I found, as I started to enter publishing, is there nepotism at times? Yes. Is it ruthless at times? Yes. But a lot of the lore you hear about publishing is just not that true. With the caveat that I've had an extremely lucky experience in publishing. I actually don't have any horror stories. Publishing has been very good to me, but they've also benefited greatly from book sales. And the one thing I think I've found that isn't true is the idea that editors don't edit. Now, I'm sure that happens for some people, but my editors are actually very edity. And for which I am grateful.
It's a good thing, right?
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I have very good editors, and I have had to train them a bit at times in terms of understanding Black vernacular, or like just the way, sometimes it just be that way sometimes. And they have been amenable, which I'm grateful for.
A little bit of both. I too have been blessed to have great editors. Most of my editors have been women of color. But for years, the only person that was, and the salespeople, were doing their thing, but I was the one selling my pizza. Mm-hmm. I was the one on the road all summer. I was the one going to signings, hooking up bookstores, traveling, paying for traveling. A lot of people love Miss Bev, but not a lot of people bought Miss Bev, which is still true. Because I've never made a list. USA Today, yeah, numerous times. But who knows what the New York Times list is about? But that used to be how you measured your career. So, but it's a blessed life. It is a blessed life. I am in my pajamas. My neighbors are out scraping their cars, windshields on 696, which we call the Ruthless. It's named after Walter Reuther, the UAW head. We call it the Ruthless. It's a freeway from the suburbs into Detroit. So they're on the Ruthless and tapping the brakes, and I'm in the house in my pajamas, drinking my coffee. It's a blessed life. It can be a blessed life. But it's, okay, to paraphrase Langston Hughes, publishing ain't no crystal stair. Okay.
Well, and let me segue to that, because you have both at times been critics of the industry. I mean, if people ask you questions, you don't step around it. You're just saying, well, there's a problem here that needs to be fixed. Or, well, this could have been done better. I'm wondering if your willingness to be frank has cost you anything in being able to express these sentiments in public. It's not biting the hand that feeds you, although the hand may feel a little nip.
Well, I have structured my career so that I am never reliant upon any one hand that may be feeding me. I've kept my day job the whole way through, so that I can say what I want, how I want, when I want. I never wanted to be beholden to any one source of income. And I never wanted to be hampered in that way. And so, yes, I'm going to be honest about publishing because I can afford to, because I have health insurance through my job. And for many years, I couldn't make a living as a writer. Now I fortunately can, but are there consequences? Yes, I am sure. I know for a fact that I am not paid nearly as much as my peers are, and that's incredibly frustrating. It's getting better, but I think I was very underpaid for a very long time, and I talk about that too because, like, let's be real. Like, these little debut writers of a certain ilk come out and make $600,000, and my first 5 books, my advance wasn't even half of that. So. My cumulative for the first 5 books. It's a problem. And so we have to call it out because the reality is that publishing knows what to do. And that is to pay writers, diversify, pay your editors so that people of color, working class people, queer people, other marginalized populations can enter the industry in real numbers, not the sad numbers that currently exist. And just, again, use your financial resources. HarperCollins, where I'm published for nonfiction, is owned by Rupert Murdoch. They have the money. I mean, all of the big 5 are owned by major multi-billion-dollar corporations. It's about priorities. And so I try to call this out because I can and because I'm well aware that most writers can't because they are trying to make a living as a writer. And, like, God bless you. I think that's a hard row to hoe.
Yeah, I tell the truth. You know, I called him out at an RWA luncheon one year. I did the keynote, and we talked about marketing and sales and how they gave the perception that Black people only read books by other Black people. This was the prevailing thought processes. So a lot of people gave me the side eye. They're like, oh, there's Miss Bev again. So the next year, at the same conference, one of the salespeople who was drunk at this event says, you know what, Bev, you were right. I was like, right about what? I talked to the accounts, which is Walmart, Target. Those are the 2 main accounts. And he said, and no, Black people don't just read books by Black people.
But it had to come from someone else. That validation had to come from.
Didn't have to listen to me or the other, all of the hundreds of thousands of authors. So, somebody gotta tell the truth, and I'm old enough to do that. So.
Yesterday, or maybe it was this morning, everything's sort of all running together. I think it was this morning, we were having a conversation, or the panel was having a conversation about romance and stigma, the reading of romance novels and stigma, and how that has lessened over the years. Maybe some people don't feel it at all, but for a long time, people would not admit that they read romances, or even sometimes that they wrote romances, that they would have nom de plume, and that would be how they were supposed to be known. They wanted to be entirely separate from this thing that they were passionate enough to do writing for, but did not want the outside world to judge them for having written it. How do you feel about that? And do you think there's still any stigma? I used to say romance fiction was kind of the Rodney Dangerfield of the, of the publishing world. It didn't get no respect. Yet, the reason the lights are kept on, the reason you have money for tours, the reason people who do precious literary things can be lauded and sent around and fed and feted, a lot of that money comes from romance publishing. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's misogyny. Anytime women are interested in something, it's generally in our culture dismissed, derided, demeaned. Anything women do successfully, people want to tear down. And so there has been a stigma, and I think that stigma is still there, but I would agree that it's lessening. But, I always think, really? You're going to judge something that this many people are into? I think do so at your own peril. And like you point out, romance and I would say genre fiction in general is what keeps the lights on. That and celebrity memoirs. And not even that, because a lot of those celebrity memoirs do not sell nearly as well as you think they do. I have access to BookScan. And sometimes I look at book sales and I'm like, y'all talk a lot of shit for these numbers. There's no shame in anyone's numbers. However, if you're going to talk shit, back it up. But, I think it's really about misogyny, and I think it's incredibly important to call it out because people don't really say that about certain other genres, especially genres that men are into. And a lot of times at my events, it's 99% women, and there's like always one man who stands up and says, I notice I'm the only man here. What can I do? What can we do to bring other men in? And I'm always like, I don't care. I don't. I think everyone should read across the gender spectrum, but women are my bread and butter, and it is fine. I love bread and butter.
I don't know. No. You look at the numbers, you look at, okay, my thing with sort of with that is all of this, and it's not new, of the people who keep telling us, well, you don't need an HEA. They want to change our genre so that people will think they're not writing romance.
Yeah.
Okay? Because they want the money. We talked about this yesterday or today. I don't remember. So, you sort of ask them, well, okay, but there's a group that you can put your book in. You don't have to put it in romance. But I want to put it in romance. Romance needs to grow up. No. You don't tell mystery people, well, you don't have any dead bodies. You don't tell sci-fi, there's no aliens. So, that's my... And yes, people think we write with crayons. They think, we need T-shirts that says, romance will not give you cooties. But this is old conversation for us, so we just poke fun at it.
Okay. I'm hesitating to ask this because it's intrusive, but I want to know, and I'm going to ask you. You all are both icons. You just are. And so the question is, do you feel some responsibility that comes with that? Do you feel like you have to be a role model, or there are things you can't do as Roxane Gay, as Bev Jenkins, because you are Roxane Gay and Bev Jenkins? Or is it just, hey, as Bev said, it do what it do, and people have to live with it?
Well, I wrote about this in Bad Feminist, in that don't put me on a pedestal because there's no need. We can all just be on the ground together. I do recognize that people see me as a role model, whether I'm comfortable with it or not, does not change the fact that it happens. And so I am mindful of it, but I don't let it dictate how I live. I am who I am, and I'm too old to pretend otherwise. And so I just try to be myself. And that means sometimes I'm going to get it right, and sometimes I'm going to get it wrong. Sometimes I'm going to, we're going to have a great interaction, and sometimes you caught me on a bad day. I will say I'm very mindful that for people who engage with me, like out in the world, I try to always be into it, because I recognize, like, first of all, who recognizes writers? No one. Like, Jonathan Franzen is not walking around signing autographs. And there's no shame in that. Like, normally the whole point of being a writer is that you get to blend in. But I am 6'3", and I'm fat, and I have tattoos, and so I tend to stand out. And I think I have to deal with slightly more visibility than your average bear. It can be a lot, but I'm very mindful of it. And I just try to make sure that I use the opportunities I'm granted to ensure that I'm not the only one being granted these opportunities.
Sometimes it's better to be kind than to be right. But as my daughter always says, Ma, it just feels so good to be right. And I think because it's generational with me, that I know that I'm supposed to make the path wider. I am supposed to, maybe not consciously, but consciously, support the younger writers that are coming up, to let them tap into what little brain I have left, to be there for them, to promote the history, but not in a conscious kind of, I'm doing this and this and this and this and this. No, just an everyday kind of thing, because it's always better to be a blessing than to be a bitch. It is, because, anyway. So, yeah, I have a responsibility because I grew up in the 60s. We all had responsibility back then. And even though I'm living very blessedly and got a lot of blessings, there's some people who don't. And when they need a hand and they reach out, the ancestors say, "Bet you better help." So anyway, that's me.
In just a minute, we're going to turn this over to you all, so you can ask some questions. But I do have a couple left, so I'm going to turn off my timer because I know we're almost done. The title of this conference is Popular Romance Fiction, the Literature of Hope. Yet, these are kind of dark times. And so I'm wondering what each of you is hopeful about. It's okay to say.
I've written about this before. I don't traffic in hope. I'm struggling right now. I'm just struggling right now, and I'll be honest, I just am. It's when you look at what's happening in the world. It's not that I thought we would solve racism in our lifetime, but I didn't think that we would lose so much ground, not only in terms of race, but in terms of gender and queerness. Like, it's just, wow, the amount of ground we lost because of one tyrant is really overwhelming. But it's not just one, because millions and millions of people put him in power. Mm-hmm. And he is facing 4 or 5 indictments, and he would win if he ran today. or at least win the Republican nomination. And so it's really overwhelming. And then you read stories about that young boy in, I think, Michigan, who was drowned by his white friends.
Oh, yeah.
Who were like making fun of him and calling him George Floyd as they drowned him. And we often talk about how it's okay, the racists are going to die out, but they're actually not. They're raising a new generation of racists. Because where does a 14-year-old learn to make a joke like that? He heard that joke and then thought, oh, here's my little friend. Then they were friends before this incident. And now this kid is being charged as with a potential to be sentenced as an adult. His entire life is ruined. But so is the young
And
boy
not
he
just
victimized.
his. Yeah.
He is going to be scarred for quite some time. And so I struggle to find hope when these are the things that we're dealing with. That said, I do see hope in the fact that despite everything we've seen happening over the past several years, and of course, really throughout history, I think we still are a very resilient people. And we continue to believe that we have to fight, that we will not surrender to bigotry. We will not surrender to oppression. We will not be okay with a state of affairs where there is so much rank inequality in this world. And so that gives me hope that we are resilient, that I tend to believe most people are actually good. And that has been the majority of my experience with other people. Most people are good. And oftentimes they just need the opportunity to demonstrate that goodness. And so that right now is the one thing that is helping me maintain a level of, I don't know if the word is hope, but even keel.
I feel a lot like you. Okay. But being a student of history, I have to look back and say, you know, this is not the summer of 1919. You know, they're not lynching us in trees and calling all their kids and having a picnic. That was one of the things I grew up with. My mother, every morning, she said, get up and turn on the radio. Make sure they're not lynching us this morning. And that's a hard thing to grow up with. But it's the truth. But yet, as you said, most people are decent. Most people care about truth. When I saw those kids in the streets last summer, doing the BLM thing, doing, you know, the George Floyd stuff, I cried. Because those were us. That's this generation is the generation that my generation has been waiting for. You know, we thought we could change the world. You know, we gave you EPA, we gave you the FCC, we gave you all of this stuff. We gave you abortion. We gave you weed. If you think about it. And now we've taken this step back. And the people who used to live under rocks when I was 12 and 13 years old are now in charge. But you look at the long view. I still think we can win this. Because there's more of us than there is of them. But you get out, and you got to get out and get your ass to the vote. You got to volunteer for these school boards. Got to change it at the local level. But I got hope because my ancestors had hope. That's all I got.
That's quite a lot. Your turn. I'm sure you have questions for one or both of our esteemed speakers? Who's got one? This one right here in the front.
I'm just wondering, and it's perfect because you were just talking about this. When we think about changing the system and bringing back hope, I wonder sometimes if we're not seeing as much progress as we all would like, because have we been, do you think, approaching the problems with the same energy that they were created with? Are we there has been a lot of talk about dismantling and defunding and whatever, but how far do we go with that? When do I just look at things and I think I'm hearing kind of the same conversation, but from different faces. And can we find a different way to talk about this? Can we maybe not talk about fighting, but talk about something? I don't know, but that's my long-winded question.
See, that's the problem. Folks is talking instead of doing action. So do what you can at your level. And if everybody does what they can at their level, in my mind, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't even, well, first of all, I think that we need to recognize progress where it's happened. And loath as I am to say it, Joe Biden has done amazing things. And the fact that nobody is out here in these streets celebrating what he has accomplished in 3 years is why we stay losing. Because it's not sexy and full of fireworks, and it's like this zillion years old dude who shouldn't be able to run for president. None of these people should be able to run for president. This gerontocracy is a crime. But that said, he has amazing people working with him, and he has done so much. His student loan work is going to change people's lives. Not mine, which I'm very sad about, but no, I actually have 5 payments left. Yay! And for that, I will thank Obama. But so much has happened. The infrastructure plan that he had is actually doing great. And he also needs to be called out for his border policies and the fact that he's deporting Haitians at the most alarming rate. But we have to acknowledge the progress. We keep waiting for everything to be perfect before we acknowledge that change has already happened. And that is to our detriment because it makes us feel hopeless. And all of that is happening as talk. But that's not all that's happening. There are people who talk and there are people who do, and there is very little overlap between those two groups.
In the back. I'm not a nihilist. I'm just going to start with that. And I'm very grateful to be here. And it's been a wonderful weekend. I hate standing up and doing this. We had a workshop with 2 of the writers, and we talked about the id and beauty and touch and all of these different concepts that are very important and integral to romance. But I had a question. How do we write outside the lens of patriarchy when we see so much of our entry points are informed by patriarchy and informed by what I call pathology, white pathology, not supremacy, because I don't find it a point of supremacy to be in the position of power that allows you to do things that are disarming. And I just would like to know, when is romance going to be for Black women? When are we going to write out of our lenses? Even though we have people like Beverly Jenkins, we have a lot of writers who are coming into writing with ideologies that are very much steeped in European standards of beauty, of sexuality, of existence. And I'm just wondering, how can we get through that kind of glass container? So, yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if I framed the question perfectly, but
well, I would say I do think some of that work is happening. And I also think you have to remember that we have all been raised in the same patriarchal, heteronormative, white supremacist world, and that it takes a lot to overcome that. And so sometimes we have to have patience with ourselves and the ways in which we reiterate the biases that we are trying to work against. It's not easy. But I also think, like, when you look at Afrofuturism and the work that's happening in that space, and Nnedi Okorafor, I think, is doing amazing work, and there's a romantic element to some of what they write. You know, when is it going to happen? I think it's happening, and it will continue to happen. And you have to look at how long we have lived under oppressed conditions. That's how long it's going to take to overcome them.
Now, do you support? Are you buying or using the library to support Black authors?
Yes, of course. For me, Black literature is the most important and vital literature in America.
Okay.
Because America is informed by the African and African American experience, though at times it's sublimated. And what I'm saying is, when I look at literature, and I don't want to be so judgmental in saying this, but I see a lot of the male models and structures for many of the newer African and African American literature looks very similar to the European counterparts.
Yeah.
What I'm saying to you is, I look at your literature and I feel really excited because I see strong Black men who love and care for Black women. And what I'm seeing now is sort of a dismantling of that in certain ways in literature. And sometimes we need to have a sense of balance. And I'm not saying we have to be proprietous, but I'm saying respect Black women. Respect Black women in literature.
Right.
Respect that we have needs, and we need care, and we need love, and we need to see ourselves as beautiful.
Yeah.
And you've done that. But what I'm saying is, let's take up the gauntlets, Black women.
Yeah.
Let's do this work. Because
I think there are a lot of Black women out here doing that work.
I do believe that. I do believe that.
Yeah.
But, and I don't want to go on, but I'm a reader that doesn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I'm just scrolling through Amazon or I'm looking through those indie piles and I see some literature and I feel very suspect of it. Yeah. And sometimes I see women writing women of color who have no business writing women of color. And I'm like, damn, I've seen a diamond in the rough on Amazon. And I'm like, all this woman needs is an editor, an agent, and someone who cares enough about her to push her work. Yeah. And so let's push these people and say, enough of Judy Garwood. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's move forward. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't want to keep.
No, I understand. You're okay. You're okay.
There's a question in the back in the middle.
Hey, when you feel something deeply, okay, just let it flow. Don't apologize for it. I wonder if you would comment on, if, you know, I'd like you to comment, all right? You may not be able to. About the connection between what I understand is spiritual energy and time. Because like when you said, you know, it ain't 1999, right? But it's like knowing that, I mean, like, I no longer believe that time moves in a line. It moves in a circle. And so, like, when Trump won, the first sermon I did was, well, back in the 30s, there were 5 Trumps. Right? There was Stalin, there was Hitler, there was Tojo. Okay, you know, this is not new. Right. So, like, it's like, can you talk about, there's a connection between the spiritual reality and the work we need to do, because time doesn't move in a line. It's, you know, it happened before, it's going to happen again.
You know, I think that's the function of the church, too.
Well, that's why I'm in the church.
Yeah. You know, and the church, in a lot of ways, has sort of ducked the responsibility that they used to carry in the black community. Don't get me started on these preachers with these Cadillacs. But then you have the preachers like there's a black Episcopalian priest on the east side of Detroit who is working at the community level. And he and his poor ass congregation are buying buildings. They've got programs for the recently released. I mean, doing all of the stuff in a way that is benefiting that community so that that community can thrive. So he's making a way out of no way. And I think more communities could benefit, not just black communities, but the community of the world in general could use a little bit more of that.
Have time for a couple more questions and then we have to wrap. Anything back there? If not, I'll ask some more questions.
Romance questions.
All right, I have a romance question while we're waiting. If your house was on fire and your loved ones were out and safe, your pets were out and safe, but you could only grab one of your works to take out with you. Thank you, Kelly Crossley. What would you take?
I'd take my laptop.
Pick one. That means a book in progress, something that you're working on that's on your laptop?
All of them. I mean, they're my babies. You know, like writing a book, I don't want to say it. You know, writing a book can be hard. It can be easy. It just depends on the day of the book. But like each book has required something of me, has taught me something, has helped me grow as a person, has helped me grow as a writer, that I can't pick just one. I look back at the 7 or 8 books I've written and I see so much change, but each book is important because I did the best I could on that day, at that time. And of course, now I feel like I could do much, much better. And I feel like my next several books are going to be much better, but I would never disavow the ones that came before. So it's like all of them, but not in an arrogant way, but more in a sort of, wow, look at how the baby grew.
Girl, I don't know which one I would grab. I'm like her, I'd probably grab my laptop or my weed.
Oh my.
Telling the truth, America, telling the
Two
truth.
questions over here, and then I think we're done.
I see you over there, sis. So we'll get you two.
Sorry, okay. 3 questions.
There, yeah,
and we're done.
there and then there. Okay, one of you.
Yeah, somebody be quick.
Did somebody get the mic? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yikes. Okay, good evening. So I have a question about censorship and book bans, which have happened in certain parts of the country. Are you, as authors, fearful about what may happen to your books of work in the future, for future generations? You know, as book lovers, we never want to see those books that we love be taken away from us. But for some, they don't have a choice. And there's always been book bans in the past. But right now, in reality, how do you feel about your work possibly being banned in certain parts of the country because of bigotry or whatever have you?
All of my books are banned. And, you know, is it a badge of honor the way so many people try to remarket it? At what cost? It's disheartening. It's disheartening. But I also know that book, like you said, it's not new. And as someone said just not too long ago, time is a circle. And you can ban books all you want, but you will never keep knowledge out of people's hands. They're going to find it. And unfortunately, we have a certain class of people who is interested in making sure that it's as difficult as possible for the people, frankly, who need it the most to find it. But it's really important to know that I think 60% of all of the book bans happening in the country right now are being done by 11 people. It's 11 people that are leading this. And it's really important to remember that. It's not the mass movement that the media is making it seem. It's just happening a lot because these 11 people, it's like QAnon. They believe this bullshit. And then they go and they ban my books. They ban Ta-Nehisi's books. They ban anything that offends them. Judy Blume is banned. Everyone who has anything interesting to say is being banned. But they cannot keep people from learning about the complexities of the world, no matter how they try, and they cannot erase history. And so I try to just keep that perspective, but it is disheartening as well.
Yeah, it's sad. But like she said, you got a very, very small group of people who are pushing this. Share the history as much as you can with whoever, whether they want it or whether your kids want to know it or not. Make them read history at the dinner table. But I try and post something every day. Because that gives people something to share, and it extends the knowledge. And a lot of my readers have my books memorized. So, I had this one woman in Detroit, this is years ago, Indigo, and she said she had lost her copy. So she had lost 5 or 6 pages, and she read Indigo every day. And she said, Miss Bev, I lost the pages. She said, but I get to the page that's there, and then I just recite it. And I said, Barbara, you are in too deep. Back away, babe, back away.
We have 2 more questions here.
So yesterday, the writers that were leading the workshop, they talked about romantic ids, or like things that you just enjoy when you are reading a romance that just like make you feel good. Whether it be someone, I think one of the writers said she really likes thighs when people describe thighs, or like beards, or just tropes maybe. So I'm just wondering, what are y'all's favorite ids, or things that you, like your brain just gets a hit of serotonin when you read it in a book? Or romance, particularly.
My romantic id is never anything involving the sex, because so much of the sex in romance novels is not great. It's too distracting to me because I'm like, that's not how that works. No. So for me, it's the push and pull. I love that. Like, I've moved back to my small town to run my family's Christmas tree farm. And my childhood enemy is there. But, oh my God, he looks so good, and he has these muscled forearms. And I am just like, top me up, because, oh yeah. Anytime in a romance novel that someone moves back to their childhood hometown, but they're like different, or they come down from a corporate job to work at the family business, you've got me. I'm there.
It means you spend a lot of time with the Hallmark Channel, don't you?
Oh, hell yes. And Hallmark fans, our time is nigh. The Christmas movie season is upon us.
Oh, and on that
Y'all
wave
in
of
too deep.
frenzy. We have one last question over here, I think.
What's there?
Okay, what am I doing now?
What's your romantic
What
id?
turns me on in romance?
Have you read
Jesus.
her books?
Huh?
It's like,
Yeah, have you read my books?
Yeah.
Banter. Strong heroes. Strong heroines. Stronger heroines. Marriage of convenience. Enemies to lovers. I don't write secret babies. And until somebody pointed out Miss Bev, you wrote a secret baby book. And I was like, the hell I did. And they were like, yeah. Destiny Surrender. And I was like, oh shit, I did write a book. But not by choice. She didn't know who the baby daddy was. But a good romance is a good romance. You know, and you can tell that a lot. You don't need to see what the tropes are that they got listed. Like, what is that? You know, they got these tropes listed. You read the back of the damn book.
Oh, I'll add one more. I just can't help it. But there's a writer, Alyssa Cole, and yeah, and like the whole like royalty series. Like, give me just a royal who's angry and like oppressed in their own like very wealthy way, who meets someone unexpected. Like, oh my God, put it in my veins, just directly.
Excellent, let her know. She's living in France now. So yeah,
Last
good
question.
romance.
Last question. Somebody.
In the middle.
Okay.
All right.
Two more. Okay.
Thank you. So when you, I'm going to use that line at work when my work bestie is least expecting it, just so I can see the coffee spray over the keyboard anyway. So when you guys are, you have to do it. What are your rituals to get in the zone and, you know, like no more BSing?
Yes, when it has gone up to here. No, at that point, I go into, depending on which, we're bi-coastal, so it just depends, but I like wait for my wife and puppy to go to bed because they're distracting. And I mean that in the best possible way. Like, they're so much fun and they smell good, and it's like, I can sort of fake right while you're sitting here, but I'm gonna need you to go to your room, which is our room, but I have to stay in the den. I turn on the TV and I just stop opening up Gmail. Gmail has to be far away, because even at 3 a.m, I'm like, maybe some opportunity will show up right now on Labor Day. No, it's not. So I really just have to like knuckle down, but I write with the television on. For some reason, that really helps me focus.
I have to have quiet, and usually my ass is on fire because I'm late, you know, with the deadline, and it's like 24/7, you know, until I get the book done. And my daughter will call me and she'll say, "Little girl, when was the last time you got in the shower? Because you're not changing clothes. You're going to sleep. You get up, you write. You go to bed, you get up, you write." She said, "And if you have to, think about when was the last time you got in the shower. You need to take your little ass into the shower." And I always tell her, "You ain't the boss of me. Get off my phone," you know. But it's yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, and the people, and my ladies on Facebook will be like, they're like my daughter, "Miss Bev, have you eaten today?"
Oh yes, work food. Any work food or anything that gets you in the zone. Junk food, whatever, like things.
I just write in the same clothes for a week.
Yeah, I don't eat while I'm writing because I can't stand a disgusting keyboard. So that's simply not something I can live with. I do bake while I'm writing, though. And then I will like go to my office and write while whatever is baking, and then while it's cooling, and then while the crumb coat is cooling, and so on. I find that baking can be a really great way of providing natural breaks and distraction during the writing process.
It's also therapeutic.
Oh, yeah, I love to bake.
It's like cheaper than therapy, and you can eat it afterwards.
I love to bake too. Did
we have one last question? There was somebody over here. I see a hand.
One in the
okay,
back.
in the back.
What are you guys reading right now?
I'm in the last 90%. Oh, sorry. She was yelling at me. I'm yelling back, right? I'm at like 93% in the new J.D. Robb because it was my plane trip book.
I just finished Let Us Descend by Jesmyn Ward that I think comes out later this year. And it's fucking, God damn it. Exquisite. She is exquisite. She is perfection. She is perfection. And then I just started Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. And it's also excellent. And I love Ann Patchett. She's great.
So, as the Mickey Mouse Club says, now it's time to say goodbye to all our company.
Happy trails.
No, that's a different show. You're getting all your 50 shows mixed up. Damn it. That's Roy and Dale.
Yes, it is.
Okay, yes. I know Gina Ree has words for you. I just want to thank my two panelists who were awesome. Wow. And thank you guys for your energy, because that was awesome. And Kate Lofton, if you teach the way you preach, I want to come sit in your class.
She does.
And I want to thank Gina Ree and the entire organizing committee, because they did amazing work. And hopefully this won't be a one-off. Maybe you'll do it again.
What?
Maybe you'll do it again. She's like, oh, dear God, please no.
I'm not going to answer that right now. But thank
Okay.
you. No, and before I get to my words, I would actually like to call up two people without whom this also would not have happened, and that's Lauren Anderson and Ife Michelle Gardine. When I said earlier that this was a community event, I meant it. This was a thought that I had talked to some friends about, but it became a real thing in this bookstore. Well, in Lauren's bookstore. You're not a bookstore. But Possible Futures provided book support for everything today. And more than that, it provides a space for this community, for Greater New Haven. And so I'm going to stop speaking so Lauren and Ife can just share a bit about what this has meant to them.
Well, we feel blessed. Elm City Lit Fest is in its 4th year. It's a celebration of literature of the African diaspora for everyone. And it's literature, literary arts, and literary artists of the African diaspora. I felt that it was important to tell our stories, to hear our stories, and to advance the knowledge, enhance the culture for everyone. And I'm so honored to have a friend and partner here in Lauren open a bookstore. And also, Lauren is the chair of the library board. In addition, so she has the connection over here. And I'm so grateful to Gina Ree for when she was talking about it, we were like, yeah, how you want to do this? You do, you know. And I understand, like, putting something together like this is crazy. And I've been doing it for 4 years, and I'm doing it next year too.
I'm going to be really brief and just say, I think that the first conversation Genia Ree and I had ever was about Miss Bev. And it was a few years ago, and it's just like such a wonderful full circle to be here in this room with all of you, with this seed of an idea that grew through these amazing relationships. I also will just make a pitch for independent bookstores. Yes. And I do think to really seek out bookstores that serve community in ways that are really reciprocal and authentic. Possible Futures is a community book space. We call it a book space because it's a cross between an independent bookstore where you buy things and a community reading room where you don't have to buy anything. You can just be a person in community around books, in conversation with other people who love books and ideas. And that's really, really important to us. And I think, you know, we are living in a capitalist economy where we spend our money is a values decision always. And when you support independent bookstores, you are supporting community spaces in a time when public spaces like our beloved library are really being starved and are under attack in a lot of ways. And so we're just super grateful for everybody who chooses to support independent bookstores and not the beast that we all want to sort of starve instead. You know, the one, the big. So just thank you. And thank you so much to Ife for just friendship, and to Genia Ree for partnership around this beautiful event.
Thank you, Lauren. And yes, Ife Michelle Gardine, founder of Elm City Lit Fest, is one of the many hats that she wears. So again, enabled by your incredible leadership. I think 2 of my co-organizers are in the room right now. The others are setting up, but I do want to just lift them up. I wrote down some words because I'm not good on the fly. But I do just want to say something I wrote earlier this week. Oh, I'm going to try not to cry. I'll be going. Pulling this off required some pretty serious levels of leadership from each of us, and trust in each other, as well as belief in ourselves. The 5 of us, grad students, have never worked on a project together before, ironically, and I can 100% say that none of us knew what we were getting ourselves into. But I am so grateful for our collective tenacity, our willingness to dream big and to work hard, and to have the chutzpah to think that we could do this, and that this was something that we, our university, and our communities in and outside of academia, Yale, New Haven, romance readers, and more deserved. I just want to name that this took a lot of faith and trust in each other, grace, and I'm so, so, so grateful for that. So thank you to my fellow organizers again.